Hello, and welcome to Book Bites, where we uncover the timeless wisdom at the heart of the world's greatest classics. In the midst of our busy lives, this is your place to enjoy the essence of great literature in just 10 minutes. Today, we journey back 16 centuries to meet a masterpiece that still speaks directly to the human heart. Have you ever found yourself wondering, am I really living the life I was meant to live? Why does my heart still feel empty, even when everything seems to be going well? Long before us, there was someone who wrestled with these very questions more intensely than most people ever will. His name was Saint Augustine. His immortal work, The Confessions, tells the story of how a restless soul finally found true peace. This is far more than an autobiography or a record of personal mistakes. It is a prayer offered to God, a lifelong conversation between a searching heart and its creator. Within its pages lie profound reflections on memory, desire, human longing, and the restless heart that can find no lasting rest on its own. How did a brilliant but wayward young man become one of Christianity's greatest teachers and saints? Let's step into his remarkable story. Augustine's youth can be described in just 4 words: a brilliant life of wandering. As a teenager, he and his friends once stole pears from a neighbor's orchard, not because they were hungry, but simply for the thrill of doing what was wrong. Later he would confess that he loved not the fruit itself, but the excitement of sin. For many years he also lived with a woman outside of marriage and fathered a son. Yet, hoping to secure social status through a respectable marriage, he eventually abandoned the woman who had shared his life. Driven by ambition, Augustine traveled to Rome. Gifted with extraordinary intelligence and unmatched eloquence, he quickly rose to become one of the empire's most celebrated professors of rhetoric. From the outside, he had everything: success, recognition, influence, and a promising future. Yet inside, he remained deeply restless. He was constantly torn between intellectual ambition, worldly pleasure, lust, and the desire for lasting truth. For nearly 9 years, Augustine devoted himself to Manichaeism, believing it held the answers he was searching for. Manichaeism explained the universe as a struggle between 2 eternal forces, light and darkness. It claimed that evil came not from human choice but from an external power of darkness. For Augustine, this was comforting. If evil originated outside himself, perhaps he wasn't truly responsible for his own sins. But as his inner conflict deepened, he slowly came to a painful realization: the one who chose sin was himself. No philosophy could erase personal responsibility. No clever theory could quiet the conscience. Eventually, Augustine recognized that Manichaeism was built upon contradictions and empty promises. It could never satisfy the deepest thirst of the human soul. So he left behind the beliefs he had embraced for nearly a decade and resumed his search for the truth. His longing then led him to another intellectual world, the philosophy of Neoplatonism. This philosophy taught that beyond the visible world lies an invisible and eternal reality. For Augustine, who had long struggled with one question, why does evil exist, it offered an important insight. Evil, it said, is not a substance in itself. Rather, evil is the absence of good. Just as darkness is simply the absence of light, evil exists wherever humanity turns away from the goodness of God. This idea answered questions that had troubled Augustine for years. Yet something was still missing. Plato's philosophy convinced him that truth existed. But it could not tell him how to live in that truth. It could point toward the destination, but it could not show him the way. The more successful Augustine became on the outside, the emptier he felt within. Isn't that often true for us as well? We raise our children well, buy a larger home, earn the respect of others, and imagine that these achievements will finally satisfy us. Yet when we reach them, another longing quietly takes their place. Augustine came to realize that this inner emptiness was not a curse, it was God's invitation. It was the clearest sign that the human heart was made for something greater than worldly success. While living in Milan, Augustine met Bishop Ambrose, whose preaching transformed the way he understood the scriptures. Until then, Augustine had dismissed the Bible as simple and intellectually unsophisticated. But through Ambrose's teaching, he discovered the profound spiritual depth hidden beneath its words. For the first time, he began to read the Bible not merely as literature, but as the living Word of God. He later confessed, "Now I could clearly see the truth, yet I was still weighed down by the burdens of this world." He longed to follow God. Yet the chains of old desires and lifelong habits still held him captive. His heart was painfully divided. One part desperately wanted to surrender to God. The other still clung to ambition, pleasure, and the familiar comforts of sin. In one of the most honest prayers ever written, Augustine cried, "Lord, grant me chastity and self-control, but not yet." Those words reveal the battle raging within him. He wanted freedom, but he feared what it would cost. He knew what was right, yet lacked the courage to let go of everything that had defined his life. His reputation, his ambitions, his wealth, his passions, they had become chains he could no longer break. As this struggle intensified, Augustine grew angry with himself. He felt as though his own soul were dying. One day, overwhelmed by unbearable inner turmoil, he rushed into a garden in Milan with his close friend, Alypius. Unable to endure the conflict any longer, Augustine wandered away from his friend, threw himself beneath a fig tree, and broke down in tears. He cried out, "How long, O Lord? How long must I continue living like this? Why not now? Why should this very hour not be the end of my wandering?" Then, through the quiet air, he heard the voice of a child from a nearby house, singing the same words over and over, "Tall léger. Tall léger. Take up and read. Take up and read." Augustine had never heard children sing those words before. He believed this was no coincidence. He received them as God's command. Immediately, he returned to where a copy of the scriptures lay, opened it, and read the first passage his eyes fell upon. It was Romans 13:13-14. "Let us walk properly, as in the daytime, not in reveling and drunkenness, not in sexual immorality and debauchery, not in strife and jealousy. Rather, clothe yourselves with the Lord Jesus Christ, and make no provision for the desires of the flesh." The words pierced his heart. In that instant, the fog of doubt that had clouded his mind for so many years disappeared. A profound peace flooded his soul. The darkness that had ruled his heart began to fade. The light of God's truth finally broke through. At the age of 32, the brilliant professor who had spent his life searching for truth discovered that truth was not merely an idea to understand. It was a person to follow. And for the first time in his life, Augustine truly found himself. Before his conversion, Augustine spent his life searching. He longed for knowledge. He longed to be loved. He chased success and pleasure, believing that each new achievement would finally satisfy the hunger within. Yet none of them could give him lasting peace. Looking back, he confessed, "I possessed many things, but I had never truly possessed myself." He also wrote, "I said that I loved the truth, but in reality, I lacked the courage to live the life that truth required." At last, he arrived at the confession that has echoed through the centuries. "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you." Those words became the heartbeat of the Confessions. Augustine realized that the restlessness he had tried so desperately to silence was never a flaw. It was the soul's longing for the one who had created it. He begins his book with these magnificent words, "Great are you, O Lord, and greatly to be praised. Great is your power, and your wisdom is beyond measure. You have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you." Later he offers another unforgettable prayer. "Late have I loved you, O beauty ever ancient, ever new. Late have I loved you. You were within me, but I searched for you outside myself." With those words, Augustine looked back over a lifetime of searching and finally understood that God had never been far away. It was he who had wandered. After his conversion, Augustine made a remarkable decision. He left behind the prestigious career that had brought him fame and influence. He was baptized and devoted the rest of his life to serving God. Over the years, he produced an extraordinary body of theological writings that would shape Christian thought for centuries. Among them, the Confessions remains the most personal. What makes this book so extraordinary is Augustine's honesty. He hides nothing. He openly confesses the sins that once filled him with shame. Instead of protecting his reputation, he magnifies God's grace. His greatness did not come from moral perfection. It came from the courage to tell the truth about himself. By removing every mask, Augustine revealed the human heart with astonishing depth. His reflections on memory, desire, identity, and even the nature of time continue to speak to readers more than 1600 years later. Yet Augustine never forgot the person whose prayers quietly prepared the way for his transformation. His mother Monica. He believed that her tears were never wasted. They were prayers poured out before God. His conversion was not a sudden miracle that appeared from nowhere. It was the fruit of years of patient love and unwavering faith. Monica never gave up on her son. She chose tears instead of condemnation, prayer instead of despair, hope instead of surrender. She held firmly to one conviction: the son of so many tears shall never perish. And at last, she witnessed the answer to those prayers. After Augustine became a Christian, Monica's deepest longing had been fulfilled. Not long before her death, she said to her beloved son, "My son, there is nothing left for me to desire in this world. I wished only to see you become a Christian. God has granted me far more than I ever dared to ask." In the final chapters of the Confessions, Augustine turns from telling the story of his life to reflecting on one of humanity's greatest mysteries, time. He realizes that so much of our suffering comes from living everywhere except the present. We are haunted by regrets about the past. We are consumed by anxieties about the future. Yet only the present truly exists. As Augustine writes, the past lives only in memory. The future exists only in expectation. Only the present is real. But he does not stop there. He asks an even deeper question: how can human beings, bound by time, enter into a relationship with the eternal God? His answer is beautifully simple. The only way a restless soul can find everlasting peace is by returning to the love of the one who created it. A restless heart is not a sign of failure. It is evidence that we were created for something eternal. If one sentence from Augustine's journey stays with you today, carry it quietly in your heart as you go about your day. Perhaps the longing you feel is not something to escape, perhaps it is God's invitation to come home. Thank you for joining Book Bites for another 10-minute classic reading. We'll see you again next time.